Hey everyone, how's it going? Yeah, okay, great. So my name is Morgan Clendaniel. I am a deputy editor at fastcompany.com. I've worked at Fast Company for a long time. I've been to many of these events. We have talked to many very fancy CEOs and people in the C-suites at lots of very important companies. But a thing I think we forget a lot is that there are hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of workers at these companies who actually do the work at the companies that make them so interesting and important. And I think both in the media and I think in the world, we have often forgotten about those people. They have gotten overlooked. And I think they have decided to not be overlooked anymore in recent years. So obviously, if you've been following the news, huge new organizing campaigns at Starbucks. Sarah has a shirt at Amazon.
Delta Airlines.
At Delta Airlines, Chipotle. There was a huge strike at John Deere. There is maybe going to be a big strike on the railroads, maybe not, depending on who you ask. And so it's a very sort of important moment for workers and labor. And this panel is called Employees Strike Back. And so we are talking to some of the employees who are doing the striking back. So just to introduce our guests quickly, we have Sarah Nelson, the president of the AFA, Fast Company cover star, and a very important voice for workers and labor. We have Chris Smalls, who organized the, started the Amazon Labor Union, organized the JFK 8 warehouse in Staten Island. And we have Saket Soni, who works, who started, great, yeah, let's applaud everyone. Who started a thing called Resilience Force, which works with sort of a new kind of worker, these often undocumented workers who follow around climate disasters and clean up after them, sort of a new and sadly growing workforce. So yeah, I guess sort of in reverse order, Saket, why don't you tell us briefly about Resilience Force, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. I run Resilience Force, and we represent a new emerging workforce that climate change has created. I started this work in the weeks after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, when the Gulf Coast turned into America's largest construction site. Katrina was supposed to have been a once-in-a-100-year storm, but since then, we have had over $200 billion disasters. One of them just happened tragically in Puerto Rico. Resilience workers are the people who do the short-term and long-term repairs. They rebuild schools, homes. They're the ones who keep a tax base in place. Without them, cities fall apart after hurricanes, floods, and fires. And the resilience economy has now billions of dollars flowing in it, insurance money, public money. But the people in the middle of it are often working for low or no wages with very little protection and very little safety. And so we do the work of protecting the workers who make recovery possible after climate disasters.
Awesome. So Chris, clearly most people know your big win, but tell us a little about sort of like where ALU is now and what you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now we are continuing to organize within JFK for sure, fighting for a contract, keeping that workplace environment engaged with everything that's going on the outside. We just had a huge victory 2 weeks ago in court. The NLRB has ruled to dismiss Amazon's objections and ruled that we be certified. So we're just waiting on our certification so that we can force the company to pretty much come to the table and negotiate and bargain with us. On the other hand, we have other campaigns that are launching. Albany, ALB1, upstate New York. So New York State is still booming, and the election is actually going to be next month, October 12th. So I'm on my way up there. After this event, I'll be up there on the ground with those workers, connecting. And some further news, we have a campaign currently in Inland Empire, Moreno Valley, outside of San Bernardino, California. So We are officially bi-coastal, and we're expanding nationwide. We got inquiries that come in every day. I believe from our latest numbers, we've been contacted by over 800 buildings. 800 workers from all over the country, and I can't tell you how many different buildings that is yet, but I can tell you pretty much everybody's paying attention to the Amazon Labor Union, and I'm happy to be a part of that.
Awesome. Sarah, tell us what's happening at the AFA these days.
The Association of Flight Attendants represents 50,000 flight attendants at 19 different airlines, and we have a big campaign at Delta Airlines. It's the last remaining major airline without a union for flight attendants. But beyond that, we really believe that we're a part of the larger labor movement. That's why I'm repping ALU here and Starbucks workers, and ready to talk about the rail freight workers who've been fighting for a better deal. But we really believe that by organizing and giving workers a voice, we're going to address the big issues of our time, because very popular issues are not making it through to solutions in Washington, and we've grown to this place where we think we're totally divided. That's been a breakdown in unions and people actually having a voice, and a breakdown in collective bargaining in this country. So it's threatening our very democracy, it's threatening our way of life, and unchecked capitalism is no way to live.
Great. That's it. We're done. So as someone high up in the labor movement who's been watching this for a long time, can you sort of contextualize this moment for us? Like, why do you think it's happening now, and what can the labor movement do to coalesce this moment?
Sure. So, I think I said when I was out at a rally with Chris out in Staten Island that this union is the answer to my prayers. I've been waiting for workers to wake up to our power. The corporate elite has money and control, but workers really have the power, generate all the wealth, and the world doesn't turn without us. And so without our voice, we're really missing the whole purpose that we're all here. And so workers have to form unions and have a way to fight back. You can't fight back when you're a single worker. And there's no CEO that would come to work without a contract. So every worker should have the same deal. And we have to organize in the tens of thousands. Why is this happening now, Morgan? It's happening because before this pandemic, people were recognizing the massive inequality in their lives, and that you started to see strike activity again, the teacher wave all across the country, grocery workers, and you saw people fighting back. And then during the pandemic, everyone had a chance to stop and take a minute and say, I am working away my entire life. And not only am I doing that, working 2 and 3 jobs just to get by, or working forced overtime that my company is making me work, and so I can't be with my family, but they've sent me into unsafe conditions. So not only are we just a line item, we're also disposable. And so people are mad, and that's why unions are popular now, and that's why unions, labor unions that exist today, have to put all of our efforts into organizing. We're not going to change the politics if we don't organize people and give people the power to change the politics.
Chris, as someone who was just recently doing this on the ground at Amazon, how did you talk to the other workers about the labor movement and about the need for solidarity and organizing?
Yeah, like Sarah said, the pandemic definitely was a catalyst for a lot of these efforts that you're seeing now, especially with my journey being fired in the middle of the pandemic, losing everything, my main source of income at Amazon, being there for 4.5 years as a supervisor, and realizing how disposable I was to the company after pouring my blood, sweat, and tears into this company. I think workers realize their value. Being deemed as an essential worker, that means that we're a necessity. That means that the company needs us. And I think workers do not want to go back to, obviously, what we were getting pre-pandemic. And we realize our value is a lot more. So this moment right now in labor is very monumental. There's a point of no return. We have to realize that what we've been getting, how we've been treated, is nowhere near what we rightfully deserve. So for workers to realize that and the efforts between Amazon and Starbucks and all the others that are out there right now, we're making unionizing cool, and I think that's great. It's a good thing to see the younger generation. It's a good thing to see either the ones that came before us now adapt to the type of organizing that we're doing. And the numbers don't lie. I think it just came out that 70% of America agrees that everybody should be in a union. And I believe right here in New York City, Amazon Labor Union, we represent 40% of that. So we have to keep it going, and we have a lot of work to do. But I think that right now, in this moment, everybody's up for it.
Second, the workers you're working with are really sort of at the margin of, labor law and everything else. What does organizing them look like, and how do you have those conversations?
Well, the workers I organize, resilience workers, are like farm workers of another era. They move around from place to place, following fires, hurricanes, and floods. When a hurricane hits, thousands or sometimes tens of thousands of homes at a time need to be saved overnight. Mayors need to keep their tax base in place. Parents need to put their kids back in schools that are flooded. So the pressure is high, and if repairs don't happen soon, towns will vanish. Municipalities go bankrupt and fall apart. So everybody's waiting for the workers. The workers are driving in and parking, usually in a Home Depot parking lot, sleeping in their cars, and working to help others come home, even as they themselves are homeless, sleeping in the streets, in cars, or sometimes in the very homes that they're rebuilding. So my organizing really takes place deep in disaster zones, often in parking lots or in buildings that have fallen apart. It's slow work, and even though these workers are in the margins of labor law, they are truly the center of recovery. These are people who are deeply proud. They have a vocation around what they do. They believe they are, and in fact they're right, they believe they are the white blood cells of America's preparation and recovery in the climate era. We need them, and so we need them to be strong and secure. So a lot of this in the last 5 years has been emerging that identity, emerging that deep sense of vocation, and bringing big companies to the table. As the amount of money has grown, there's been an enormous amount of industry consolidation. Private equity has bought up all the companies in this space. Yeah. And we're building these agreements between workers who, though they may be fragmented and disaggregated, they still deserve the equivalent of a contract with these companies, and they can get rights. So that's where the organizing is.
We're talking a lot about the workers. Let's talk about bosses first. I mean, what do CEOs need to know about what workers are feeling right now, and what what is coming for them, I guess, if this movement continues?
Actually, Sackett was getting a lot of the problem. Everything is becoming monetized, financialized. It's moving to decision-making at Wall Street and in hedge funds, rather than in even the corporate boardrooms. The CEOs actually have lost power in this unchecked capitalism state. And so actually forming unions and fighting for the tools, the good jobs, the resources to be able to do our jobs, better consumer benefits. Those are all things that unions provide. And frankly, we put power back in the hands of the CEO, because the CEO gets to say, no, we can't do stock buybacks. We have to reinvest in the company, which means it's going to be better for the consumers, it's going to be better for the workers, and it's going to be better if that CEO is actually interested in running a good company. So that's the first question, because that has to be there. But when I stood on March 18th of 2020 in the Airlines for America boardroom with 5 CEOs from the industry, and we talked about how to save the airline industry, some of the demands that we had on the table were to ban stock buybacks and to cap executive compensation. And they agreed to those. They didn't want to agree to neutrality and union organizing because we wouldn't want to have long-term control from the unions. But they agreed to those things. Why did they agree to those things so quickly? Because they knew that they couldn't have the pressures from Wall Street in the middle of disaster. They wanted that taken off the table. And we made that happen. That was the union demand. So what CEOs need to know is that you're going to run a better company, you're going to have better success, and you're probably going to have more control of your company when you have unions on the property.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, is that what you would say to Jeff Bezos if he was here? What does Jeff need to know?
Well, I have a different perspective. Jeff wouldn't last 1 minute in the room. You know, the honest thing about what CEOs should expect is that, you know, workers are coming. You know, workers is going to fight back. Yep. We're not going to go away. We're not going to allow them to continue to sweep things under the rug anymore. You know, we've been very outspoken and very vocal with our organizing, and it's been effective. You know, Jeff Bezos ain't the CEO anymore. I don't even have to talk to him. I'm really focused on Jossie, who's been running his mouth. And this is, you know, once again, you know, we're close to home. You know, there was an event last week with all these CEOs in LA, and I was able to walk up in there. So, you know, workers being in the same room, workers getting their demands met, workers fighting back, and workers sending direct messages to these CEOs that enough is enough. We're not going to take being mistreated anymore. We've been at their front doors, and we're going to continue to be at their front doors. And if, you know, if I have anything to do with it, it might be a guillotine outside. But I'll keep it professional. And I'm just going to continue to organize these workers until we force these CEOs to come to the table.
Yep.
I mean, speaking of keeping it professional, I'd like to know sort of about your process in like why you ended up an independent union. Is that, you know, Teamsters are working on Amazon, the Bessemer warehouse. Why did you decide to go it alone as opposed to hooking up with an existing union? Well,
I just think, you know, as an Amazon worker and the people I organize with, they're Amazon workers. We know the ins and outs of the company. For us, it was a better path to our victory. Amazon couldn't use the same traditional style tactics that they used with former established unions. This is your actual workers in the building. You know, they can't say that we're a third party. They can't say that I'm making a $500,000 salary. They can't say that the union has a history of financial woes or whatever the case may be. They can't use the same things. And we thought that, you know, as Amazon workers, that we know what our grievances are. We live the reality of our grievances every day. So who better than us to organize ourselves? And it worked out, you know. I know independent route is not really common, but you know, when it comes to Amazon being a different animal, being something that hasn't been unionized in 28 years, it's a reason behind that. You know, the style that we had to use to organize was never been seen before. That's why a lot of people have a lot of questions about how we organize, you know, how our identity is. But it works for us, you know. I think the way we went was the perfect way to do it. You know, independent, not being tied to a Democratic Party, not being tied to, you know, political views. We only kept our issues work-related, and it worked for it resonated with the workers there.
I was going to ask you what sort of the broader labor movement has to learn from sort of the success of some of these independent unions. And
the same thing, you know, the same thing I told Lindsey Graham. You know, it's not a left or a right thing. It's a workers thing, and for us, you know, the labor movement sometimes have to be held accountable. It's not wrong with saying that. It's nothing wrong with saying that unions have to be held accountable. And I think right now, a lot of the efforts that I'm doing is forcing other leaders in the movement to take a stance that is outside of their comfort zone. And they can learn a lot from, you know, even the younger generation, you know.
Yeah, look, I've done all kinds of new hire presentations, and my union is a non-traditional union because we were formed by women. have been led by women. And that is not common. And we kept our independence in that way, and that was really important because not only did we have to fight for our seat at the table with management, we also had to fight for our place in the labor movement. And so while labor has been through this sort of 40-year wilderness time where we've talked about labor management peace, and it's been about going behind a door and making a deal rather than really practicing what Chris is talking about, the whole labor movement really is the workers. And every single union constitution actually reflects that. If the workers understood that, they could actually rise up and democratically take over their union. But you know, that is really where our power comes from. And I say to people all the time, you know, unions are not institutions. It's the hearts and souls of the people who are your coworkers. And you have to have the institution to roll through the tough times. You have to be able to keep that in place. But we have had to fight every step of the way just to have the place that we're in. And so I think that led us to being able to say that we were going to stand up for the federal workers who were locked out of work or forced to come to work without pay during the government shutdown in 2019. And flight attendants said, no, we're going to strike because we're not going to go to work in these conditions. It's increasingly unsafe for us. And we had a lot of people ask us, well, what about the pilots? And we said, you know, well, the plane doesn't take off if the pilot doesn't fly it, but it also doesn't take off if flight attendants aren't there to staff it.
Right.
And so throughout the pandemic and with what Saket is talking about, what's happening right now is there is an unearthing of who is doing the work and how that work is identified as valuable. And traditionally what has happened, even in the labor movement, is that the corporate elite have divided people by racism and sexism since the beginning of time. And there are certain jobs that have been defined as less because they have been defined as being held by women or people of color, migrants, and that just simply is not true. So this is what's happening in the labor movement today, is that people are starting to understand, if I'm gonna get my worth, I have to stand up, I have to be a part of something bigger than myself. And as Chris and his coworkers put it, it was really just about, you know, we're all going through it, I think he said.
Yeah.
We all have stuff, and we loved each other through it. And that's how we formed our union.
Right.
Second, you say, if you go ahead, please.
Well, you asked what we would want CEOs to understand, and I would ask CEOs to consider a man named Mariano Alvarado, who I know very well. This is a gentleman who was in the Florida Panhandle, originally from Honduras. After Florida was hit by Hurricane Michael, entire counties flattened, entire homes blown away from their foundations, entire schools reduced to rubble, and you know, the sort of recovery had to happen. Schools were 6 weeks away from reopening, and people had to come home and put their kids back in school. The recovery depended on people like Mariano. Now, it was raining one day. He wanted to take a break from the roof he was rebuilding, asked for that break because sheets of rain were coming down. And I think everybody here, who here would, in the supervisor's place, have given Mariano the right to come down off that roof? Everybody, right? Well, he wasn't allowed to come off that roof. He slipped, he hit his head. He was left for dead in front of a hospital. As an undocumented worker, he was not allowed entry into health care. And he recovered fully and is now organizing other workers like him. Now, see, we need Mariano Alvarado to repair those roofs in Florida. Here in New York, you had a hurricane come to Louisiana, turn into a tropical thunderstorm and flood basements in Brooklyn. You need Mariano Alvarado to repair those basements. And so Mariano, to me, is a highly skilled worker. Mm-hmm. And see, the popular culture, I think, imagines that Mariano is just an extra pair of hands. Yep. Most people would refer to what he's doing as cleanup work. You see, that's because when people of color and women do things, it's called cleanup work.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm trying to reposition Mariano in the eyes of CEOs and the investor community as a skilled and deeply responsible worker who courageously tries to complete his work just as courageously as Sarah's members or Chris's members or those teachers in the schools during the pandemic. And that's the only shot we have at recovering and being okay in this really volatile era.
Second, you said it best, clean up work. Who made the mess and who does the cleanup? It's time for the women and people of color and young people to lead.
That's right.
Right?
Right.
Yeah. I want to talk a little, Chris, you mentioned that you just won a big case at the NLRB. But I think, we've seen in the Amazon campaigns at Starbucks, the sort of consistent violation of labor laws and sort of poor enforcement thereof by the government. How do you feel like the administration and the sort of infrastructure of labor law is working for you?
Oh man, I knew that was coming. Well, obviously, our organizing efforts, like Sarah said, the workers in the organizations and unions and the moment that we're in right now, we're forcing politicians to do their job. I had to call out a couple just to get them to come to a rally. I had to, I did go to the White House, and I can tell you now, they didn't play my audio for a reason. But I didn't go in there just to shake hands and take pictures, There's some real problems that we're dealing with. And for the Biden administration, this NLRB is really detrimental to our efforts. If we lose this administration in 24, I can tell you, all our efforts right now, all the court cases, all the hearings, they're out the window. The injunctions are out the window. So for us, forcing this administration while they're in office, while they have some power to do more for labor activists, to do more for unions, do more for the working class, that's only going to happen if we organize. So, I'm going to call them out every time. I hope other people join me with that. It has to be a collective. It can't just be the ALU or our Starbucks workers. It has to be all of us as a part of the working class. And I think, we all know the issues. They delay, these corporations are going to delay, they're not going to recognize. So what can we do as workers? We have to prepare ourselves, whether that is going on strike. I hope so. I hope that we all come together in one day and say, what the hell with this? Also, where's our tax dollars really going? They can give $10 billion to Amazon for Jeff Bezos to fly his penis rocket up to space. Then they can give $10 billion to the NLRB so that they can be funded to hire more staff to take on these cases that are happening all across the country.
Sarah, what's your sense of sort of? Just going to move on.
I think you should dig in.
Yeah, it does look like a penis. I don't know. You can't. It's undeniable.
I call it a dick rocket.
What's your sense of sort of, Biden has talked a lot of game about being the most pro-labor president, low bar, so he could hit it and not do that much. Where do you see them?
Incredibly low bar. Although I want to just say that it's exactly what Chris said. We're only able to just sort of have some grounding to be able to walk forward, as opposed to an administration working completely against us, right? So I don't want to understate how important that is. But this administration, frankly, is risk averse. And we have to make the CEOs risk averse. We have to make the billionaires risk averse. And so there's more that could be done. That strike that is happening in Alabama, Warrior Met, the coal miners who mine metallurgical coal that's used to make steel, to make wind turbines, to actually fight climate change, actually. They have been on strike for 18 months, longest strike in the country. And they not only had a really bad decision from an NLRB that's underfunded and have some bad people in that region that had to be walked back then by this administration, but it took tons and tons of effort by the labor movement to put pressure to get a good decision out there so that we didn't totally destroy the right to strike down there. But we need to have Marty Walsh do what he just did in freight rail and come in and say, Warrior Met, get to the table and let's settle this contract. These workers have been out long enough, and the strike needs to be over with. And we need to have the same thing happening. We need to have Biden calling Howard Schultz to the White House and saying, you're going to bargain right now. You've been acting like a criminal, denying your workers their rights. So I'm going to call you here, and you're going to bargain with them, and we're going to get this done. And so we'd like to see more of that. As Chris said, well, they've got the power and the ability to do that. That has to be happening now. And people want someone to fight for them. When I tour around with Sean O'Brien, the new Teamsters president, and Bernie Sanders, people go insane. And mostly young people go insane. They get so excited. You know why? Because Bernie tells them the truth. And he's out there fighting for them. People want someone to fight for them. And so I wish this administration would just take that to heart, because it's not enough to just say we're pro-labor and to say that the government should be encouraging unions. Put your money where your mouth is and actually take those actions and take some risks.
That's right.
We have nothing to lose. The Earth is burning while the dick rockets are spinning off to the moon.
Sackett, sorry to make you follow that. I assume there's basically no regulation in sort of your space. Like, what do you need the government to come in and do for you?
I mean, look, you know, it's pretty simple and pretty basic. I mean, how many of you live in a home or a dwelling of some kind? Okay. Well, then, you know, what you need is for that home to be secure, because the next disaster can happen day after tomorrow. Most homes in the United States are not resilient. Most schools in the United States are not secure. They're not insured. We live in a calcified country that is not prepared and not adaptive to the future. Now, what it takes to be adaptive to the future is the kinds of workers I represent, resilience workers. But they're hanging by a thread, and even if they were fully protected, included in all of the civil rights and labor laws, there wouldn't be enough of them. So what we really need the United States to do is build a 1 million-person strong resilience force that works to make every home and every school, every city secure, adaptive, resilient to the future, makes every homeowner and renter equally resilient for the future, so that when storms come, they don't bleed away their wealth trying to recover. It's that simple, right? We need this to be, whether it's a private or public workforce, well paid, with all of the rights, respect, and a contract that workers deserve. It's really that simple. And the thing is that, you know, there's so much futility about climate change and so much pessimism. The truth is, 70% of the damage that climate change causes through disasters in the United States is avoidable. You just need to strengthen the infrastructure we have, make it better. And that is ultimately what we need government to do. The United States has been slow, it's lagging behind, and there's no reason why in this nation we have this problem. It's an issue of political will. And yes, we need the workers to be strong, but we need more workers. We need them to be invested in. We need training programs. We need people to move away from low-end, badly paid service industry jobs and shift them into high-paid, secure, long-term careers in resilience. We need them to have choices.
Jobs guarantee.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Chris, I want to ask you, you know, Amazon, huge company, the bulk of the workers are in the warehouses and driving, but there are, you know, a lot of sort of white-collar workers in Seattle and in other places. What does solidarity look like from those workers to you? Like, what's your ask for those people to help you get what you need?
Yeah, well, they definitely have a role to play. Tech workers, there's nothing stopping them. They actually have a direct communication line to upper management, opposed to what we have in the warehouse. So for them, it's even more important that they speak up whenever they see, us in the media, which is quite often, complaining about the things that are happening in our warehouses and the working conditions. It's important that they stand in solidarity. We're the ones that are on the front lines. We're the ones that are sick in the warehouse, losing our lives, getting injured, being mistreated, misplaced, and they have to the comfort of being able to work from home or work behind the computer desk, or work in Seattle with corporate, and that's fine. We respect the fact that they're able to do that, but at the same time, we need more voices to speak up, and we've seen some of that throughout the pandemic. We've seen the women out there sign petitions and flag things as things progressed on the pandemic, but it's still, that wasn't enough. We want them to also be out there on the picket lines with us, be out there demonstrating with us, show the bosses that they're not afraid to also step outside their comfort zone, and they stand in solidarity with the workers in the warehouses, because we're the ones that come from that community. Amazon sets up shop. They lease these properties. They reap the benefits off of our backs, off of our communities. So it's a part of New York City. JFK, Staten Island, there's no reason why Staten Island should be called the Forgotten Borough. That doesn't even make sense to me. And especially now, you talk about, this is go back in history, people forgot. It's like Staten Island.
Is Staten Island?
Staten Island. We organized in Staten Island where they called it Trump Island, they called it this, they called it that. It's where the Wu-Tang came from. A lot of good history over there. There's a lot of good history in Staten Island. And we put it back on the map. JFK 8 Staten Island is a worldwide trending topic, no matter what. So now it's really important that New York City, we all buy in to what is going on, paying attention, demonstrating, showing up for these workers when they call to action. These things matter, and also voicing your concerns. If you're in the tech industry, it's so easy for you to put together a petition, way easier than it is for us in the warehouse. So do that, stand in solidarity with your workers. That's the only way we're going to be able to force these CEOs to really come to the table.
Sarah, I want to give you the last word. But it's I think we have how many people in this audience are in a union? Wow, okay. So, I imagine a lot of you have pretty comfortable jobs with nice benefits and, good maternity leave and whatever else. Tell them why they should organize, even if, they are not a resilience worker or a warehouse worker.
They're coming for all of us. And no, I mean, it's real. And you see it, a lot of people like to separate economic issues from social issues. And you'll hear people say, I'm socially progressive and fiscally conservative, or the other way around, or whatever. You can't separate the two. So the Dobbs decision was about dehumanizing half of the workers in this country. It was about taking control and having control of people. And if you call jobs cleanup jobs, and you have people working in the shadows, and you devalue or dehumanize those positions, that's what you can do. Tech workers, workers in white collar, we have people, you can't do your work without having someone check your work. And unions are a check on everything. And if you're not busy organizing your union, forming your union, they're going to run away with all of it, because they're going to keep going. The chart has gone through the roof on productivity. That means fewer of us doing more and more work while wages remain flat, and more billionaires taking all of the wealth and all of the decision making and moving it right out of any kind of democracy. There is no democracy when you have total control. Who has to answer to, who do billionaires have to answer to? Chris Smalls. Right? And all of you. So if you think you're tired of taking it from the boss, I tell people all the time, if you're tired of pension defaults for Main Street and stock buybacks for Wall Street, build your union.
That's right.
If you believe healthcare is a human right, build your union. If you believe Women are equal with men. Build your union. And if you just want to tell the boss to kiss your ass, build your union.
All right. Well, I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank Sarah and Chris and Sackett so much. There's another session in here later this afternoon. There are a bunch of sessions upstairs in the forum all afternoon and tons of networking upstairs. If you tag anything on social, use the hashtag FCFestival. And thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you, Morgan.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Morgan.